Hello, class. My name's Brandon Webb. Let me get in frame. I'm one of Miss Higgins' friends. And when I read, I like to read next to a fireplace. So I got mine fired up. She asked me to read one of your chapters in your book. I said, what's the book about? She says it's kind of like a cross between Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones and Star Trek. So I'm more than on board for that. I've already read a little bit, and I'm really excited to get into it. I work at a dog food factory. I'm a lead on my shift, which means I'm in charge of people. And if there was one piece of advice that I could give to you is nobody who's really good at something woke up like that. They worked really hard to get there. And sometimes it seems like they were just born like that, like Michael Jordan was just born to play basketball. And it's not true. You had to practice. And if you work hard, you can accomplish great things. So keep working hard, listen to your teacher. But until then, let's get into this. She asked me to read chapter 9, Discovery. Really excited? Let's get to it. Joshua's father slid into a chair opposite his son, crossing his arms as he sat. Joshua gaped, but said nothing, suddenly unable to voice a single of the million questions rolling about in his head. It seemed neither could say anything, an internal silence ruling over the pair as they each studied the other. Joshua's father finally spoke. What are you doing here, Joshua? That simple question broke the dam of questions Joshua's had, the pent-up torrent pouring out of his mouth. He asked question after question without waiting for a reply, each question more of a statement and accusation rather than an interrogative seeking truth. As he railed against his father, the man sat and listened, content to let his son pour out his rage. When Joshua could think of nothing else to ask his father, he stood and said, "Come with me, Joshua." Joshua didn't want to leave the cell ever again. Yet, he didn't want his father to go. Taking a deep breath, Joshua rose and followed his father to the door. The sentry stopped him. "Listen, Brennan," the sentry said. "I'm not sure you should." Joshua's father, Brennan, raised a hand, asserting, this word is tough for me, I'm going to be honest, assuaging the sentry's objections. "Don't worry. What other harm can he do? He's with me. I'll take responsibility." He led Joshua back down the hallway into the elevator. When the doors opened, they stepped inside. Brennan hit the button for the first level, typing in a code when prompted. A short ride later, the doors opened. They entered the largest bridge Joshua had ever seen. A multitude of men and women at consoles on either side, processing information received. Joshua followed his father through the center aisle, heading towards a raised dais with several large windows and screens surrounding it. Dais just means like a platform. That's kind of up. I had to look it up. It's kind of a word I haven't seen. In the middle of the raised platform sat a man large enough to fill the enormous captain's chair. As Joshua and Brennan drew close, a smaller man whispered to the man in the captain's chair. He stood towering above his aide. "This is Captain Valdis, Brennan," said Brennan. Second. Sorry. A broad grin on his lips didn't match the tone of his brown eyes. Valdis descended the steps into the aisle, stopping in front of Brennan and Joshua, towering over Brennan despite being on the same level with him. "Is this the lad that caused the trouble aboard my ship?" said Valdez, peering down his nose at Joshua. "This is my son, Captain." "I see," said Valdez, appearing amused and not angry. "What an exceptional youth you are, Joshua. Quite resourceful, like his father, I suspect. How was it you managed to free your family?" Joshua met Valdez's gaze, not shrinking from it. "Good lad," Valdez chuckled. "Yes, quite a good lad. Don't allow anyone to intimidate you and assuage you from your beliefs. If Valdez thought Kimberly was his family, then it meant he couldn't know everything." Joshua didn't correct the man. He could think... I'm not in frame. Sorry. This is a one-man operation. I don't have a director. Oh, 1 second. Yeah. We're good. Sorry. Oh, if I lean back, I wasn't going to be in frame. I'm keeping this in. I want you guys to know the struggles I did reading this in front of my fireplace. There we go. There I am. Okay. There we go. Okay. I'm sorry. Joshua didn't correct the man. He could think what he wanted. Valdez laughed again. "He is quite courageous, Brennan. He waltzed onto my ship, and the girl simply vanished. How is that possible?" It was unsettling to watch his father scramble for words. Brennan cleared his throat. "We are still looking into it, sir." Said Valdez, unsatisfied, casting his arms out wide, pointing at the bridge. He said, "What is it that you think we do here, Joshua? What is all this for?" Joshua shrugged. "Come now, boy." Valdez clicked his tongue, shaking his head. "Don't be shy. You must have an idea. You hunt and kill innocent dragons," Joshua said. "No," said Valdez, his tone suddenly terse. "Nothing can be further from the truth. We protect life. Dragons take it. We have been in constant battle with dragons for centuries. Only now do we have the capabilities to defend ourselves from them. Hopefully one day soon." The captain's aide approached and whispered something to Valdez. He grinned and clapped the aide on the back. Chuckling deeply, Valdez faced Joshua. It is rare we preemptively find the one the dragons are after. It seems they have a keen interest in your sister. We'd hoped to lure them here. However, one of my other captains has just arrived with some important information. We will no longer have to worry about defending ourselves from the ruthless dragons. "Why?" Joshua said, fearing the answer. "We know where they come from. Now, if you'll excuse me, gentlemen, I have a meeting to attend." Valdez left the bridge and entered a side room to shake the hand of a man Joshua couldn't recognize from the distance, yet who seemed vaguely familiar. "I'm trying to arrange a more suitable apartment for you," said Brennan, as they headed back to the third level cell. "I'm fine where I'm at." The cell door open and waiting. Joshua strode in as if owning the room and flopped onto the bed. I like it. It's small, comfortable. One sec. I think I lost my fire. It's okay. I think it'll come back soon. I'm trying to protect your sister, Joshua, said Brennan, leaning against the door jamb. By abandoning her? By destroying dragons. Joshua sat up and stared directly into his father's eyes. At what cost, Dad? Joshua said. Did you ever stop to think about the cost of taking her and me into space? Did you and Mom consider what Rebecca needs can't be found here? That instead of protecting her, you're killing her? I refuse to believe that there is anyone in heaven or on earth that cares more for Rebecca than I do. I will do whatever is in my power to save her. And so will I, Joshua said, easing back onto the pillow, hands behind his head. And how dare you imply you are the only one who loves her? Done with talking, he kicked his feet up, staring at the ceiling. If you care that much for her, then you'll let me help her. Joshua said nothing. Taking that as his cue to leave, Brendan began leaving but stopped. Before Rebecca, we were hunted by dragons. I won't let it happen again. With that, he left Joshua alone. After the door shut, Joshua got up and paced until fatigue began overtaking him. Let me do that sentence again. After the door shut, Joshua got up and paced until fatigue began overtaking him. He felt hungry and tired, yet he didn't want to eat or sleep. He'd almost dozed off when the door buzzed open. The sentry poked his head in. Boy, get up. Someone's brought you some food. I'm not hungry, Joshua said grumpily, turning towards the wall. Someone shuffled in. The door zipped shut again. Not even for pancakes? Told you that fire would be back. Said a familiar voice. Joshua spun around. Hannah stood in his cell, holding a tray of steaming flapjacks. What? How? Hannah? Hannah laughed. Joshua remembered he wanted her to laugh. Now she had at his grand eloquence. His face flushed. She set the tray on the bedside table and sat on the bed beside him, smoothing out the fabric of her long, floor-length yellow dress. He grabbed a fork and dug in. My father had to have a face-to-face with Captain Valdez about some important information, Hannah said. It seemed it was Captain Oron who found out the location of the dragons, Joshua said, speaking between gulps. Speaking of gulps, I'm getting all dry. at the fire. All right. Back. Sorry. Unfortunately, Hannah said, bowing her head. Don't be ashamed, Joshua said, his mouth full of food. Someone was bound to find out. I am ashamed, Josh. Part of me wanted him to find out. I was there when the dragon took my mother. I demanded the dragon take me as well. The dragon turned to me, her deep, sapphire eyes, kind and compassionate, and said, "It's not time, child." Then the dragon left with my mother, not before my father attacked it, getting a tooth for its troubles. I miss her, though I know there's nothing I can do to get her back. You still wish to try? Joshua said. A sad sigh escaped her lip. I don't hate the dragons the way my father does. I hate not having my mother. I have to stop these people, and I have to warn the dragons. Joshua said that way. How are you going to do that? Shrugging, he took a few more bites to think. Kimberly's ship, the one I had to get here, is still attached. If I can get into it, I can escape. Even if you do, you'll never get away. You can't outrun this one. Then I'll have to disable it, Joshua said, a devious grin forming on his lips. What can I do? Do you know the system where the dragons live? My father won't tell me. Then there are two things you must do. First, find out where they are. Second, find a way to let me out of this cell and past the guard. Making her mind up, Hannah nodded and stood. Okay, I feel like I'm betraying my family. But I also want to help you. You're not betraying anyone, Hannah, Joshua said. You're helping them. You're right, she said, smiling, wearing a look of determination. As she stood, he stood with her. She clamped her hand in his, squeezing it, as if making a pact. It might take a little while. Don't worry. Just leave it to me. Who's worried? Certainly not me, Joshua said, gripping her hand tight. Hannah said, absently wiping a strand of hair from her cheek. I should probably get going. Right, Joshua said. That's probably wise. I'll need both my hands. Releasing her hand as if it had suddenly started burning, Joshua blushed. Well, I suppose you should take it with you. I thought you were just lending me a hand. He cleared his throat, not daring to look at her face to see if she laughed at his joke. She probably didn't. After knocking on the door, the guard let her out, leaving Joshua alone again. Relaxing back on the bed, he stared at the ceiling, bemused grin on his face. His mood soon soured. Though he just stuffed himself, hunger's pain still plagued him, his head hurting. He tried to sleep. Though drowsy, his mind raced while he waited for Hannah to come through. Unable to lay on the bed any longer, he paced for what felt like hours until an alarm sounded in the hallway. Several minutes passed. The door opened. Hannah ducked her head in while keeping watch outside the room. "Hurry," she said. "This is your chance." "What's happened?" Joshua said, glancing at the flashing red lights. "Dragons! They come for someone! We don't know who!" "Perhaps they come for me," Joshua said, smirking, holding his aching head. "I feel like death right now." I'm going to read that again because I thought that was good. I feel like death right now. "Don't say that," Hannah said, not laughing at his attempt at humor. "Now go. I'll try and clear any guards from your ship." "Do you know the system?" "Not yet. Dad's busy. And Regal is being stubborn." Seeing Joshua's dejected frown, Hannah grinned. "Don't worry, Joshua. He's my baby brother. He'll tell me what I want to know. Trust me. With everything I got, because," he shrugged, "because I got it." Their paths leading in different directions. He left her alone and hurried towards the elevator. Once on the fourth level, Joshua hurried out of the elevator and sped down the narrow passages. This one darker and less clean than the other floors. It didn't take him long to find the engine room. Sorry. He stepped inside and looked around the massive engine antechamber, not sure how he'd find what he needed. An old man wearing a blue jumpsuit looked up from the chair he slouched in, apparently oblivious to the alarm sounding all around. "What are you doing here?" the man said, his scarred face appearing menacing. "What are you doing here?" the man said. His scarred face appeared menacing. I was told to check on the Aptech," Joshua said, looking around to avoid the man seeing the grins on his face. "The what?" "Speak louder. I can't hear over these infernal alarms." "The Aptech, the automatic thrust engine control," the old man sniggered. "Don't tell me," Joshua said. "There's no such part. Sounds like someone is playing a joke on you." "Great. Everyone seems to be doing that to me today. Great. Everyone seems to be doing that to me today. There is a part that does something like that. It's called a RAID. Rapid acceleration intertransitional diode. Do you want me to show you?" "I know where it is. Thanks." Chuckling and mumbling to himself, the old man returned to slouching, his eyes closing. The large opening leading into the bowels of the engine beckoned to Joshua. Kimberly had been incorrect. Nothing about the ship resembled anything aboard the Acheron except for the pipes he could bang his head on. He hurried through the narrow spaces, wondering how they could be smaller than the ones on his ship, despite the engine being 4 times its size. As he searched, often backtracking, he began to see the familiarity. The parts themselves may have been different. Their functions remained similar. With that, though, his search patterns changed. Remembering as best he could his own ship, and now he thought about it. Kimberly's smaller version of his ship, that he fixed in a short amount of time. Joshua accounted for the variation in size and soon narrowed down his search for the attic, or raid as the old man called it. Not wanting to admit it, and vowing to never say anything if he ever saw her again. He grinned, shaking his head in disbelief. Kimberly had been right after all. If you've been on one ship, you've been on them all. In the nearby locker, he found extra diodes. Not wanting to strand indefinitely all those aboard, he hid the spare parts about the engine instead of destroying them. Returning to the active raid, he stared at it and took a deep breath. Once he destroyed it, things were going to get a bit crazy. Taking a wrench from the tool chest, he raised it. "What do you think you're doing?" the old man said. Joshua spun. The old man ambled towards him. "I'm about to take the ship out of commission." Joshua pressed his lips together, grinning with his teeth. Before the man could reach him, Joshua swung the wrench and shattered the diodes. The old man stood stunned. Pieces of glass flew in all directions. Since the alarms already blared, no new ones sounded. The man grabbed Joshua's wrist, Joshua shook free and raced in the other direction, leaving the wrench behind. Though the old man knew the engine room better, Joshua had spent more of his time while searching for the raid and discovering an alternative means of exit. He reached the engine room antechamber at the same time as the old man. Once on opening and level ground, Joshua raced out of the room, zipping the door shut behind him. He flew down the hallways, bumping into several people as he ran. Not knowing what the alarms was for, they yelled at him for being rude. Joshua apologized as he ran, not looking back for their reaction. Again, he reached the second level. This time, men and women hurried in all directions, anxious to do their jobs during the dragon attack. Unlike before, several sentries stood at their posts near the entrance to the docking bay. Joshua strolled toward them, trying to figure out a way past. Hannah rounded the bend at the far side. Joshua's horror. She pointed at him and yelled, "There he is! Don't let him escape!" As the guards turned towards him and took a step, an odd buzz sounded. The two guards suddenly began shaking, as if dancing a weird jig. As one, they flopped onto the deck. Regal and Hannah stood behind them, each with a stun gun in their hands. Now dressed in a light green flight suit jacket and gray flight pants, Hannah hurried forward, her black flight boots squeaking against the metal deck as she checked on the fallen guards. When Regal saw Joshua, he scowled his brow, narrowing. Oh, him! Regal said, glancing towards Hannah. Him, Regal said, glancing towards Hannah. That's who you want me to help? Regal sneered at Joshua. He just left like a little coward. He just left like a little coward. Ignoring his brother, Hannah stood, motioning towards Joshua. Hurry! Don't mind Regal. Hi, Regal, Joshua said, rushing towards the open dock bay. It's good to see you again. Whatever, Josh. My dumb, mean, and bossy sister may like you, That doesn't mean I do. Hannah blushed and stowed her stun gun in her small black backpack. I like her too, Joshua said. But I like but I like you as well. We could be best friends. Guy's laying on a little thick. I'll not be friends with a traitor, Regal said. He's not a traitor, Hannah said to Joshua. Hannah said to Joshua, she said, the planet is in the Rio system. The Rio system, Joshua said, committing it to his memory. He took a step towards the open portal linking the large ship with Kimberly's. Step away from the portal, Regal said, pointing the stun gun at Joshua. Knock it off, Regal. Hannah glazed at her brother. Put that away. Rigo shook his head. You told him classified information. I can't let him go and warn them. Rigo, enough of this. Hannah placed herself between Joshua and Regal's gun. Step aside, Regal said. Hannah shook her head, sighing with defeat. Joshua placed a hand on each of Hannah's arms and eased her to the side. If you wish to shoot me, Joshua said, go ahead. Don't ever point that thing at your sister. That makes you the coward. Regal's eyes narrowed as he squeezed the trigger. A buzzing sound. Joshua felt his entire body seize up. Every muscle froze. All of them. Growing suddenly very heavy, he slumped to the floor, Hannah catching him to ease his fall. You asked for it, Regal said, sneering. Easing Joshua to the deck, she stood and snatched the gun from him, as easily as plucking a daisy from the ground, towering a full head above him. She gazed at her brother, her face close enough for him to feel her breath as she railed at him. Tristan Regal Chase, you are a selfish little brat. You've never seen me truly angry or truly bossy. Enough of this bitterness and hatred towards a dragon you've never seen. You only know what Father told you. I've seen the eyes of this dragon. It isn't a monster, but you are for stunning someone you said was your friend. Is this how you treat a friend when he needs your help? Though still as a stone, Joshua remained awake, his eyes still alert and functioning, as well as his ears. Regal tried to look away. Hannah placed her fingers on his jaw, snapping his face towards her. You will help me get Joshua on that ship. You would choose him over family, Regal said. By helping him, I am choosing my family. Something I should have done long ago. Hannah kept her gaze fixed on her brother. Her eyes fierce yet compassionate at the same time. Fine, but don't expect me to keep quiet about this. Speaking softly, her voice just above a whisper, she said, You will not breathe a word of this to anyone, especially Father. Repeating her words in a mocking tone, Regal stooped to take one of Joshua's arms. Hannah taking his other one. Together, they moved him into Kimberly's ship and strapped him into the co-captain's chair. Unable to speak, Joshua tried using his eyes to ask what seemed to be an obvious question. Regal also seemed to know the dilemma. Hannah, he said, ensuring the seatbelt secure. I know you're smart, and Joshua's probably capable when he's not as stiff as a statue. But who's gonna fly this ship? Who's going to fly this ship? Why do you think I'm dressed like this? She said, in a manner that left no doubt for her intentions and no room for argument. Should I go with you guys, he said, his tone suggesting he didn't want to do anything of the sort. Without a hint of command in her voice, she said, you need to help Father. After Regal hurried from the hatch and closed the portal behind him, Hannah buckled herself into the captain's chair. I said you could trust me, she said, squeezing Joshua's hand reassuringly. You'll be fine in about 10 minutes. Assuming we survive that long. It's going to be a bumpy ride. Releasing his hand, she focused on making their escape after hitting a button that detached Kimberly's ship from the larger one. Her motions not random. She began hitting switches and pushing levers. The Dragon ship responding to her inputs without complaint. Despite the console rife with strange symbols and dragon language, she guided the ship away from the AOC vessel as if she'd been piloting it her entire life. If you've been on one ship, Joshua tried to say, only grabbled sounds came out. Hopefully the dragons accosting the other ship will leave us alone. Hopefully the dragons accosting the other ship will leave us alone, Hannah said. One hand on the throttle, the other on the attitude control. I feel like it's supposed to be altitude, but attitude control. Joshua grunted his agreement. Looking out the front of the ship, he could just make out the dark shapes of creatures circling the AOC vessel. Dragons. Many of them, all kinds of them. Some sparkly, others fiery. Several bright, and one dark one. Scales blacker than night. Well, Hannah said, taking hold of the throttle. Here goes. Before she could engage the engine, she let out a short yelp, pushing back in her seat as if trying to get away from something on the window ahead. Joshua's breath caught in his chest. Unable to leap backwards or forward, he remained more frozen than before. What he saw would have made him let out a scream if he'd been able, and leap out of his skin if capable. A pair of black eyes staring into the cockpit. They'd come face to face with a real live dragon. And that is the end of chapter 9.